Our final presentation for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the CIO, RBL Bank, Mr. Sankarson Banerjee. Please get your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Banerjee joins us on stage.
Since I'm the last presentation, I promise you my entire presentation is less than 30 words. Okay? I haven't counted exactly, you can count, but I'm pretty sure it's less than 30 words. So basically, they said reimagining the future, they said, Star Trek and all that, let's get to Mars. So I said, okay, what presentation, what can I give a bunch of CIOs who already spend a lot of time doing this reimagining? So my presentation therefore is very, very short on 4 core ideas that I use to reimagine my own short-term future. And I'll just speak about some experiences of mine rather than giving you any kind of theoretical framework. So what I'll do is, the basic idea behind the future is, and I've had some unusual successes and some case studies and all that, I've realized the core to reimagining the future, and it is harder than it looks, is to let go of what holds you back in the past, right? We all think of the future in terms of a better past. BlackBerry thought of the future as an improved keyboard. When the cars came around, they thought of future cars as being better horses and things like that. And this usually holds us back. We think of the future, therefore, as just a little bit ahead of what is already today and not miles ahead. While we are still thinking of putting people on the moon, Elon Musk is thinking about going and living in Mars and things like that. So basically, there are 4 constraints that I think as ways to guide me on what to look for in the future. One is, we need to expect things different, not improved versions of existing, but quite dramatically different. That is one of my theories. So whenever I'm faced with a problem where I need some transformational, not everything requires transformational. For instance, there's a lot of everyday, day-to-day stuff that you don't really think of changing the game or anything like that. But whenever I'm faced with something that is not done very well, so I'll give you an example. Recently, we've been trying to do these cloud migrations. So when I first came to RBL Bank had done 2-3 years of POCs and this and that. And we had not really moved anything to the cloud in the 2-3 years. So I said, we need to expect different outcome from this. The outcome must be dramatically different. What is different? Normally our outcomes are, it takes 6 months to 9 months to move anything. Okay? And I said, I've got some past experience on cloud and I've worked with it. It should happen in 10 days. That is the different part. The expectation is that it should happen in 10 days. Of course, you do your homework, you do your planning, this, that. But the actual move, when you start moving to when you end moving, go into production and switch off your original application, it should be 10 days. And of course, it was 10 days. We are an Amazon, an official documented case study. How to do it, I'll leave, there are various ways. I actually didn't do any of it. Somebody else below me, once he was given a different expectation, was quite successfully able to do it in 10 days. Remember, as I said, none of it is done by me. I didn't touch a line of code, I didn't do any config, and 10 days is too short even to do a review. So I didn't do any reviews. But it got done and it got officially done. We are still live on those systems. Nitin Gadkari, when he first became Home Minister of Maharashtra, he said flyovers take too long to get built. Typically a flyover used to take 5 months. And he didn't go and say, okay, we'll make 5 months into 5 years. He didn't say 5 years will become 4 years. He said Bombay needs a lot of flyovers. In fact, he had planned out 57 flyovers. Anybody who lives in Bombay knows this. He says 57 flyovers need to be built. I am Home Minister only for 5 years. And because aage piche election, this, that, milake, I have 1 year to build 57 flyovers. This is his public statement. So he says, I'm going to change the way. Once I give a contract, I want all 57 built within that year. This is the fastest that India ever built flyovers anywhere. India never built flyovers. India built nothing in 1 year. Buildings used to take 5 years, forget flyovers. So he changed the expectation. Then of course, there are ways to build. The fastest flyover was outside where I lived, Goregaon. I lived in Sai Baba complex. The first flyover that came up in 34 days. 34 days from the time that the first digging started to the time that the flyover. Of course, there was no politician to inaugurate it, otherwise it would have taken another year. But 34 days later, cars were going over the flyover and the flyover still stands. It wasn't some temporary structure that collapsed after a week. This is what, 15 years, 16 years later. Actually much more, 25 years later. The flyover still stands. There is people in, so that's the thing. Changing the expectation allowed Nitin Gadkari to totally change the way flyovers were built. The technology did not change, the companies did not change, but the delivery really changed. So that's the first thing. We need to expect different outcomes. If we don't expect it, it will not happen. Second is, a lot of us are constrained by what we have experienced as shortages in the past. Especially technology, has changed a lot. My phone, forget my phone, my watch probably, my smartwatch probably has more compute power than the mainframe I used to work on when I was in college. Okay, the mainframe had a total capacity, so each disk used to be 1 MB, a disk of this size. They came in these, you had to lift them up, there's a handle on top. I'm sure some of you have seen them. Each was 1 MB and IIT Kharagpur was a rich college, so it had 10 of those disks. Okay, so 10 MB. Attached to a CDC mainframe. The CDC mainframe was nitrogen cooled. It had a total CPU capacity of 3 megahertz. Today it's gigahertz. Okay? We are talking about 3 megahertz. I'm telling you, my smartwatch is more powerful today. But you see, our expectations of power haven't really progressed that much. The difference between even a 1,000-fold increase. Forget 1,000, even 100-fold. I had this presentation in NSE. What is a 100-fold increase? A 100-fold increase is the difference between a person running and a jumbo jet. Okay? And again, you can easily do this calculation. I'm not making it up. But it is hard for us to conceive of that kind of increase. Whereas underlying this, the technology has indeed increased, not 1,000-fold, but actually, by Moore's law, if you calculate from the time all of us started our careers to today, it is about 25 to 30,000-fold increase. But our processes haven't become that much faster. EOD should have finished in 3 milliseconds if that was the case, right? End of day. Today we are still doing EOD in 4 hours. Better than 12 hours, but 4 hours. Because we are still running on existing constraints. The cloud is an infinite machine. Actually, effectively an infinite machine. No, not even a large Indian company or not even a large global company can saturate the cloud anymore. Effectively, it is as big as the ocean for them. But none of us really make use of it. Like Netflix indeed makes use of it. Hotstar makes use of it. Hotstar, pretty tiny company, maybe 200, 250 employees, produces 50 million streams at its peak simultaneously. Because they use the cloud is effectively infinite. And that is the part that I keep thinking, whenever I'm faced with a problem that takes 12 hours to do, or 20 hours to do, or something that's taking much longer, can I transform it from the physical limitations of the current world, which is a bit like the cake problem. If you cut it in 2 dimensions, you're stuck to 6 slices. It's very hard to do three cuts and do anything more than 6. But you have to take it out of that dimension. And a lot of us have that challenge. It's hard to rethink our own. So whenever I say, okay, EOD is taking time, we are running short of EOD time, what can I do? So one of the challenges we've had with great success, statements get sent out. So in India Infoline, we used to have 1 hour to send out, and those days India Infoline was the biggest broker. We had about 10 million customers, about 1 crore. And regardless of whether they trade or not, you have to send them a statement. So sending out 1 crore statements before 8:30 in the night used to be a major challenge. Then we said, okay, we have to figure out how to. Each statement takes about 4 or 5 minutes to create. So again, infinite machine, the best way to do it is to break it up into 1,000 parallel machines. It took us a while to think through. We worked with another IIT Bombay guy to create that machine for us, create that setup for us. Technology-wise, not particularly complex, but we ended up doing everything in about 15-20 minutes because a batch of 1,000 is not very hard to send. And you have 1,000 machines sending a batch of 1,000. Creating 1,000 VMs is not very complex. What used to hold us back was, on-premise, it is unheard of to create 1,000 machines. I mean, 1,000 machines is like, HDFC Bank. On the cloud, your nephew probably creates 1,000 machines for fun. So that's the difference. Once you start thinking infinity, many of these future things become possible. And it's very hard to do. I keep practicing it, saying, if I had infinite resources, could I do this problem in 5 minutes? And then I start breaking up. Obviously, nothing is infinite. Even the cloud is not actually infinite. There are cost constraints, there are physical constraints, all kinds. But the constraints tend to be far higher than you imagine they are. So the next one. Okay. Next one is, we are also tied to our own assumptions of what is limiting us. And I think it's always two things: compliance and cost. Our first reaction to many new things is, it will be too costly or it won't meet compliance. Every bank in India has said compliance is the reason they're not moving to cloud. But actually, RBI encourages you to move to cloud. Many banks are already on cloud, 100%. FIS, Bandhan Bank is 100% on cloud. And things like that. But you will hear this a lot, right? Because those are the chains that we are bound by in many other situations. We are indeed bound a lot by compliance. And therefore, we assume we are bound by compliance in every change we make, which is probably usually not the case. And there are things that compliance will prevent you from doing, but you have to look at that saying, first, is the solution worth trying? If it is worth trying, then I'll try and make it compliant. First, let's see if it works. First, let's see if I get to Mars. Then I'll figure out whether I'm allowed to go to Mars or not. ठीक है ना? अभी allowed से क्या होता है? अभी तो जा ही नहीं सकते. तो पहले देखते हैं कि जा सकते हैं कि नहीं. And then we'll see what the cost is, whether the cost is economical or not, and whether the compliance is met or not. Generally, once you have a solution that works, you will be able to convince the regulator that it is worth doing. Unless, of course, it is indeed not worth doing. Regulators are typically not unreasonable. Sometimes they are, but mostly they are not. And cost is a matter of benefit. People are willing to spend a lot, provided the benefit is great. If the benefit is not great, then people are not willing to spend a lot. I mean, all of you have very expensive phones. You could do with a significantly cheaper. All your phone calling would happen in a 1,000 rupee phone. But there is a lot of benefit to the extra tens of thousands that we are all paying. And that benefit actually cannot be realized if you first think cost. कि मैं तो 1,000 rupee के ऊपर phone करूँगा ही नहीं. Then you're stuck. And that's again I realized, these are the two things that even in my own mind always holds me back, and I therefore, nowadays when I hear those two words, I think, okay, maybe I should relook at it. If those two words appear, cost and compliance, including InfoSec compliance and all, I need to look at it. If it is still worth doing, then I'll figure out the cost and the compliance. And one very common place, again, happens is, a lot of our data transformations are a lot more efficient if you put it on cloud. We had this anti-money laundering, so we used to do anti-money laundering on bulk every once a month. Now we are doing it in real time, which is huge database to be compared to. So originally we said, ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता. On-premise तो इतना एक साथ नहीं कर सकते. Then finally we said the only way to do it is a 256 CPU, 1 terabyte memory machine, because उतना data है. So I said, ठीक है, we'll put it on cloud. We'll do it in real time. We'll put it on cloud. We have 2 months to figure out how to optimize it. Till then, we'll put it on cloud, we'll run it at a humongously costly machine. But how much is humongously costly? This is the fetters part. It was 12 lakhs a month. Okay, we ran it for 2 months, 24 lakhs. Which of your budgets will get busted for 24 lakhs? Okay, it was, even for me, not a particularly big bank, it was not even a basis point. If I had run it for 2 years, I would have been really in deep trouble. But for 12 lakhs a month, it's not a big deal for a few months. And then in those 2 months, we managed to optimize it out. Now we run it about 1 lakh a month. But the benefit of anti-money laundering obviously started 2 months before. And in those 2 months, we also understood a lot more about what to optimize, as opposed to saying it can't be done. And therefore, we never learned anything much more. Okay, last is tools. Very simple. I've realized, and again, this I learned from my nephews and stuff. Much of the tools we use are grossly outdated. Like recently, I had a niece who told me, "What is a CD?" You know, I still have a CD collection. I just got rid of it after she told me because it was so embarrassing because I don't have a CD player anymore. And I'm sure many of you are in that box. I have some cassettes also. The thing is, we are still living with tools of today, when we were growing up, the tools we learned to use. You know, query editors. Actually, you should not be using query editors. You know, my nephew doesn't use it. He drags and drops. And it works just as well. And productivity is much higher. That is the thing. The tools actually define our productivity. And I've realized all of us actually grew up in a technology that is entirely changed. But we haven't really, it's very hard to undo your childhood assumptions. You know, I'm still quite sentimental about CDs. I still have DVDs. I threw out my CDs, but I still have the DVDs. Even the same thing, I don't have a DVD player. None of my devices have DVDs built into them. The last few times I used to play it on my laptops, but even my laptops no longer have DVD players. But I have the DVDs because it's thoda sentimental, I can't throw it out. But the thing is, the world has moved to streaming, and now some other nephew will come along and say, "Ye kya hai? What is in this box? What is this thing?" And we'll have to, you know, that is the one thing I think that it's a big unlearning for us, and it's very hard to do because you spend years and years learning it. And technology moves very fast. So the 2 or 3 tools that in particular are important is the development tools we use are very outdated. We are using what I call the tailored suit model. When I was a child, everything used to be tailored. And we are still writing custom code for everything. But if you look at your nephew who builds a website or a blog or even an enterprise application with AI in it, you know, if you go to a hackathon, they write tiny amounts of code. 2 din mein kitna likhega? You know, they can't possibly even type out 1,000,000 lines of code. But he's, you know, they do a lot because they don't write that much code. They are using tools that we don't use. So hackathons is a great place to go and watch people coding. The second place is databases. We are still tied, all of us are very deeply tied to relational databases. Relational databases are great for one kind of problem. We have just applied it everywhere. The world is not tied. Amazon, for instance, its core is not a relational database. Most new age products cores don't have relational databases. So they don't have the constraints that we have. We spend a lot of time saying, since we need an RDBMS, ये सब चाहिए, DR चाहिए, zero data loss चाहिए, ये चाहिए, वो चाहिए, बहुत कुछ चाहिए. You know, Oracle को EULA देना है, ये सब. But the rest of the world has moved on. They don't have the problem, so they don't need the answer because their tools are different. And you know, all of us, I mean, including me, we have a tiny footprint of NoSQL. But 99% of the world's data today sits on NoSQL databases, which is very different from when I grew up. And when I grew up, we used to say the same thing about relational databases. Okay, 99% used to sit on RDBMS. That is long gone. ठीक है, that's it. अभी dinner.
Thank you very much.